What if you didn't have to eat anymore, but instead drank your food? That's an idea that popped first into my head after I consumed a little bit of content about this idea, and I didn't really follow it any further. I didn't really research it any further, but I actually don't really know why, because it's something that really would fit my mindset usually, but I didn't. So maybe I looked it up and it was just way too expensive. But now, again, I discovered this idea once again. And now I actually am diving into it a little bit, and I am at least testing it. So what I wanted to search for is something that could replace a good ketogenic diet with something that is less, ideally less expensive, that cuts out my grocery time, that also cuts out the time I am still thinking about food and I'm still trying to optimize food, and basically outsources the nutrition I have, or the nutritional requirements I have, to a third-party company that is not me anymore. And the idea is this: you cannot be an expert in every single field of your life. Of course, of your life maybe, but you cannot be an expert in all the different fields of science, for example. Therefore, outsourcing something like nutrition to a company that specializes in providing a good nutrition is maybe a good idea. And the third or the fourth point is actually not only the grocery time you save, not only the cooking time you save, but you also save the time eating, and you also save the time washing dishes. So therefore, you have all these different components of food that just take a lot of your time and also attention. Just the amount of... So there are two things, I think. If there are two things that I would now want to discuss if I discuss my past with food. In my first part of my life, the first part of my life where things were just a certain way, I just ate 3 to 5 times a day. So basically me as a kid and as a teenager. And in this part of my life, I didn't really think too much about food because it was kind of provided by my parents and also cooked by my parents for most of my life actually. And this was of course very convenient, and therefore I also didn't really optimize it too much. I got into fitness in my late teenage years, also in my mid-teenage years already, but I didn't really get into fitness nutrition or into trying to optimize my nutrition for fitness in my late teenage years or in my mid-teenage years, but I only got into it in my late teenage years. That's what I wanted to say. So therefore, that's kind of the first part. And in this part, I didn't really think about food. I even found myself often just sitting there at dinner with my family and just I didn't really want to eat something because I just wasn't hungry. And I also just not really liked any of the foods that were on the table. Probably because of this principle, I kind of realized the last years, if you are satiated already, and this can have different causes, but most of the time it is that you are satiated already. And if you are satiated already, just the food that would taste nice if you were hungry doesn't taste as nice anymore. So therefore, food just tastes bad actually if you are not hungry anymore. Apart from the foods that are very, very processed, because there is kind of an evolutionary principle that is in the work, or that is probably working all the time, which is the more nutrient dense, or let's just say energy dense a food is, the more you can still eat even if you are already full with normal foods. And this is the reason you can still eat a piece of cake after you ate already a bowl of spaghetti, for example. So now, in the second part of my life then, I tried fasting. And I tried to basically take the nutrition into my own hands, also because I had to. And now in this part of my life, when I tried to optimize my nutrition, and I also tried to optimize fasting, I realized just how much work it actually was going to the grocery store, also thinking about how to save costs and the trade-off you have when trying to get the best nutrition, but also not at the most expensive grocery haul ever. So therefore, trying to find the right balance between optimizing your finances and also your food intake is also something you have to think about. And this was basically one of the findings I had. But another one was that if I then in my life included fasting, then I actually, at least within the fasting times, whenever you are hungry, you are actually thinking more and more about food. And this is kind of a strange paradox, but it's also kind of obvious. Your mind, so the subconscious part of your mind, actually wants to influence you into eating again. And of course, this has different causes, but now, why did I just mention all of this? I actually cannot quite remember. What I can remember though is then the transition, maybe, to something even better. So the idea of leveling up this part of my life would be something that is a very appealing idea. Leveling up my life into a life where I just didn't have to think about food anymore, where the food I ate for the whole month actually was delivered to my door at the first of every single month. And then the only thing I had to do was to take something like this, mix it, and then just drink it. And that's already it. Of course, this has a few very obvious downsides. The first downside is that you get rid of food. And this also means, of course, you are not really getting rid of food, but you're getting rid of traditional food. And this means that there is a trade-off, obviously, between enjoying food and not enjoying food. But enjoying food because of the incentive people have, companies have, to just make food more tasty and to use things that are not, that evolution didn't have time to optimize for. Evolution didn't have time to optimize for a world in which most people now malnutrition. So the statement I wanted to make, or I wanted to include, is that most people who have problems with nutrition these days are basically people who are malnourished these days, are not malnourished because they eat too little, but because they eat too much. And that's kind of very unfortunate, obviously, but that's also something evolution didn't have time to optimize for. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe this might just be a solution, and therefore I wanted to give it another try, because it also just fit so neatly into my mindset of just, it's not that this is my super mindset, it's just that it makes sense. Just doing the things that make sense is actually something that I found quite useful. So, of course, saying something like useful is only another word for something makes sense, so therefore it's just the process of optimization, I think. And so I searched again. I did some research, basically Googling things and watching a few YouTube videos about people who actually tried HUEL for a week, tried other meal replacements for 7 days, for example. And what became clear to me is that I didn't really want to go with something that is actually marketed as something that is like very sweetish. Not Swedish, but sweet-ish. So I wanted to go with something that is as close to natural foods, at least in terms of the taste, as close to natural foods as possible, and also as close to a ketogenic diet as possible. The problem now was that I didn't really find something. I didn't really find something that would actually deliver. I just tried to take one of my earbuds out. That actually would deliver into where I am living, into the country I am living. So therefore, so basically I found a company, but the company is very expensive, and so the products are very expensive, not the company itself. And it's called Health Code, and it seems to be a very good approach to replacing your meals, maybe all of your meals. But first of all, it was expensive. Second of all, it didn't deliver into my country. So then there are the other alternatives that are left. The second alternative that was left was YFood, which I only discovered later on in my research. And the third alternative, it's not an alternative because, well, it's just an option, not an alternative. Of course, it's an alternative to health food, Health Code actually, and well, YFood and HUEL. So, why not YFood? Because they only offer, once again, just normal high carb options. And high carb is not something that really works for me. I actually discovered multiple times already when I go into keto and then, or also into fasting for a longer period of time, that my mind just seems to, so there seems to be an accumulative effect going on, that is actually my mind just going faster and faster and faster. Of course, in terms of sleeping, this often isn't really fortunate, but in terms of just the mental load I am able to bear, or just the mental work I'm able to do, it is just better to have a clear mind. And therefore, going away from a ketogenic nutrition was not something that I would be cool with compromising with. Oh man, my English is so bad. So therefore, I tried to find an option that was ketogenic and also actually delivered into my country, and also still was with the bigger companies. And what I found is a kind of a workaround, and it's called HUEL Black plus one portion of, so it's HUEL Black plus oil basically. So if you take HUEL Black and you mix it with one portion of oil in terms of weight, not in terms of volume, then what you get is a very ketogenic version of HUEL. The problem obviously is that HUEL then is not the full HUEL anymore. So basically HUEL is optimized for a nutritional intake of 2000 calories a day. And if you then only take half of it and you replace the rest with oil, and this is actually something that has more calories then, because oil has 9 calories per gram, and protein and carbs only have 4 calories per gram, which means if you add, in terms of the weight proportion, 1 scoop of HUEL, let's say 45 grams, and when it comes to black HUEL, 1 scoop is 45 grams, and then you add 45 grams of oil. This could be something like nuts, this could be also something like olive oil, then you end up with more calories than if you took 2 scoops of HUEL. So this was basically the overview why I got HUEL. So now I tried the whole thing for 7 days already, maybe even more than 7 days, but I actually had quite a lot of problems. And the actual recommendation HUEL gives on the website is to take this and to mix it with desiccated coconuts in a weight proportion of 1:1. So this means for every, I just explained the whole thing, just use desiccated coconut instead. And so I tried it. And the main problem I have up till now is that I couldn't really try this really well, because I actually got 2 flavored packages. And so HUEL comes in unflavored and flavored. And I got the flavored ones because maybe I just wanted to try them, but more likely I just was in a sweetish phase and I just wanted to have something sweet, and therefore the idea of getting cookies and cream for a month was something that was appealing. But of course it didn't make sense, because I just ate very clean before. I just ate very savory before. Actually, I dove into dairy products a little bit in the last 2 months again, and also eating lots of salad and things like these. So therefore, getting something like cookies and cream, which is, and I also got vanilla, was not a good idea at all, because I actually couldn't really eat it alone. And even with the desiccated coconut, the taste was just too intensive. And I even almost wanted to throw up after trying it. So, well, so much about the taste. So the idea is now that I will get unflavored HUEL, and I will still try it, because I think this might be just a small step into a direction where I just have much more time available in my life. And since time is the only thing that is constrained, actually, and of course your health is also constrained, but you can try to optimize your health, but you can also try to optimize your time, but everybody just gets the same time. Therefore, I think it just makes so much sense to at least try it. And so the approach I would take is not to replace everything with HUEL, but I needed to make it easy, because what I realized in the past about my mind and about my conscious mind is that the idea of quitting something forever is just something I cannot really handle. So let's say I want to quit sugar forever. That's just an idea I probably cannot handle if I just ate a lot of sugar in the last 2 weeks. So it worked in the past like this. I just said, what if I tried going vegetarian for a week? And I tried going vegetarian for a week. This was in 2016. And then I just said to myself, oh yeah, it wasn't that hard. How about going 2 weeks? And then after the 2 weeks, I was like, oh, how about going a month? And I'm still vegetarian to this day. So basically I have been vegetarian for almost 6 years now. And I never really doubted the decision. I also didn't really have any regrets because it just became slowly a habit. And because I didn't really have to quit it, there was not a real necessity, and there was also therefore not a real pressure. I could start to eat meat again. I don't identify myself as a vegetarian too much. It's just something I could do. And this frame of framing a decision of something you can do versus something you are not allowed to do or something you shouldn't do anymore is just something that seems to work in my mind. So now, when it comes to HUEL, and when it comes to maybe replacing a lot of my meals with HUEL in the future, now the same idea applies. And I actually think this mindset is, again, something that will work. And it is, so the strategy is like this, or you could say it works like this. I can replace, so HUEL is basically, will be, at least if I try it again with the unflavored version, will be just the standard, the thing I eat just daily. So I also will still try to eat it once a day, which then would mean that I basically don't have to think about food. I don't have to plan food. I don't have to go grocery shopping anymore, apart from maybe getting additional vitamins and things like these. But these are sort of the supplements are things you can just get delivered also, because they are very long lasting in comparison to fresh fruit or fresh vegetables, for example. So the idea would be to just switch as the standard, the default, to HUEL. But I would still be able to get normal groceries every day I wanted to. So therefore, it would save me a lot of time, but I would still have the option to go for it whenever I wanted. And this is actually also something that worked in the last weeks and in the last months when I tried to quit sugar again. So I actually lived at a different place before, and at this place particularly, it was not very easy to stay away from sugar. Even I had up to, 4 years before, maybe not 4 years, but much more. I actually can't quite remember. I think I quit sugar somewhere in 2014 or 15, and then I stayed off sugar, so basically not eating sugar at all in anything, apart from the things I couldn't really avoid, because in the past there weren't just sugar-free options for all of the stuff. So sometimes getting something like these small cucumbers in the glass, there is just sugar in it, and of course you could also avoid it, but I had a few exceptions, a few minor exceptions. And then I went to a different country, and so basically the problem with getting completely off sugar is that if you then try something in a different country, you experience different cultures when traveling. The problem there is that you cannot often do these things, and I didn't want to rob myself of all these potential experiences. Therefore, I had this rule whenever I would travel outside of my main country, that I would be able to basically make an exception. But this turned out to be something that was not quite useful, because the only reason I could stay away from sugar so long was because it already became a habit. But once I broke this habit, I also began again to crave these things. And then when I moved to this different place again, it actually just became more and more complicated to stay away from sugar. And now I'm in this place again, and not again, but I moved to this place, and now it took a lot of time actually, but now in the last weeks for the last month, for example, I stayed almost completely off sugar, apart from one day, again, which was something I wouldn't even have thought would be possible again for me, because it was just something that I couldn't quit. So now when it comes to switching to something like HUEL, I think this approach again makes sense. This is what I'm trying to say. I, of course, can get normal foods every time I want, and this is also the approach that worked in the last months for sweet things. I could get sugar at any point in time. I could run to the grocery store during the day, which of course isn't something that is really useful, and it's also not something that I want to do, but I could do it if I really had a very, very urgent craving and I just couldn't stand it any longer. Then I could do it. But if I didn't need to, then I just wouldn't, and then it just fades away, this craving over time just fades away. And now, when getting into something like cookies and cream flavored HUEL, this was a huge risk actually. A huge risk I didn't really think through beforehand, because I just should have opted for the unflavored version. But the recommendation on the website just said most people don't like the unflavored version, but nevertheless I should have gone with the unflavored version already. So now what I'm trying to do is with the next delivery, I tried to get the unflavored versions, but there's actually kind of a problem because I just have a few problems with the delivery. So I have a few coupon codes, but they actually don't apply in the grocery cart, not in the grocery cart, but the online cart you actually have, and therefore they just don't write me back. I just don't know why. So what I will try next is to replace these versions with the unflavored versions, and then just to try it with different kinds of nuts. Why nuts? Because nuts are usually very high in fat already, but they also have protein in them. And since I still am doing a little bit of fitness on the side, so basically am going to the gym, that's what I'm trying to say, is that just having even the black powder, which is higher in protein, with something like basically only fat, would mean that I would still only amount with 2,000 calories to about 80 grams of protein. But this is a little bit too low. It would be probably better if it was just a little bit higher. So therefore, switching the all oily to something like nuts, which also have a very high percentage of oil, would be something that then flavors the unflavored HUEL and makes it nut-like, but it would also give me a little bit higher protein intake on a given day. So this means what I'm thinking of now is getting the unflavored versions of HUEL, and I would actually need around 1 package of HUEL for a week, because usually you would need for 2,000 to 2,500, let's just go with 2,000 calories. If you eat 2,000 calories a day, so basically the standard thing, then you would need every 3.3 days or so a new pack of HUEL, if you only ate HUEL. So now if I mix it 1-to-1, I get a little bit more calories, but it would also, 1 bag of HUEL would last me for a week. So therefore I would have to buy 4 bags of HUEL each and every month, which without a coupon, but I actually will get, I think, a discount, would amount to 130 euros a month. And additionally, what I also have to buy is either oil or nuts. And now the cool thing is that I can vary the taste a little bit. So what you actually get in the grocery store is not only desiccated coconuts, which is basically smashed nuts in a package of 200 grams, which is very nice. Why? Because actually the 200 grams of nuts or desiccated coconuts is actually combined with the 45 grams of HUEL. So basically I would take 4 scoops of HUEL, which would equal to 200 grams roughly, actually 180, but the normal HUEL has 50 gram scoops, the black HUEL has 45 gram scoops, and this would amount to roughly 200 grams, 4 scoops, and the 200 grams are in 1 package. And this again makes it very easy, because then the only thing I have to do every single day is I take 4 scoops of HUEL, and then I take just 1 package of nuts, of smashed nuts I get at the grocery store. And if I now want to vary the taste, but also kind of the protein a little bit, I can either opt for the very high fat option, which is desiccated coconut, but what you also get in the bakery section of the grocery store are actually smashed hazelnuts, also in 200 gram packages, and that just makes it so easy. The nutrition for 1 day, all of your nutrition for 1 day, is just mixable in 1 or 2 minutes. It is 1 package for 1 day, which means if I go grocery shopping, I can just think of it like 7 days. I need 7 packages of nuts. And since I have HUEL in store all the time, I just get HUEL. And even if I want to switch to something that I can actually chew, without switching to something without HUEL, then I could still eat 4 scoops of HUEL and just switch the smashed nuts to normal nuts. And these normal nuts usually also come in 200 grams packages. So that means the options I have now are desiccated coconuts, hazelnuts, or almonds smashed. Of course, hazelnuts and almonds are a little bit more expensive than the desiccated coconut. So the desiccated coconut is in the grocery shops around my home, actually 80 cents, 80 euro cents. And the other two are 150 or 180 euros. And this means I have 3 different flavor options with the unflavored HUEL. Additionally, if I really want to, I can also just get a flavored bag of HUEL and mix it. So for example, 1 scoop or 2 scoops of flavored HUEL and 2 scoops of unflavored HUEL. Then I would have basically the same taste, but a much more mild taste. It would still maybe taste like cookies and cream if I really crave something sweet, but it wouldn't be a totally very sweet artificial taste like this actually, or the vanilla taste. So if I want a little bit of taste, I can just opt for one of the 4 bags a month. I can just opt for a sweetened version I like. And then I also have the 3 additional nut options. And actually the 4th option is to just have not coconut, but peanut. And the nice idea now is, so peanuts don't come smashed, but peanuts actually come as peanut butter. So this is kind of very similar in terms of getting it. There is actually a shop around the corner at which I can get 250 grams of unsugared, so sugar-free peanut, which of course isn't then really equal. And it also is a little bit more expensive at 2 euros. But what I can get from Amazon is 1 kilogram of peanut butter in a jar for around 6 euros, which then means I can also just get a peanut flavor. So this means I have now 4 flavors in terms of nuts, and I just see them equally. Of course, in my fitness pal where I track my calories, I will have them differently because the proportions are slightly differently, but then I have 4 options of different nuts for HUEL. And additionally, I just can get mixed nuts, for example with I think they are called pecan nuts or macadamia nuts or things like these. I can get just 1 bag of macadamia nuts and then also just mix it again with 4 scoops of HUEL. So I have these mixed, smashed options that I can get in the right package size. And additionally, you can also get salted peanuts, usually at 200 grams in a tan, not in a tan, but in a can, in a tiny can. That's what I wanted to say. And additionally, I could also get just the normal nuts. So actually what is available in the grocery stores is usually a nut mix with often cashews, hazelnuts, almonds, and maybe walnuts. That's usually the one option they have. Then another option is actually at Aldi, also around the corner. And this Aldi actually offers different nuts, a different nut mix, which has macadamia, pecan nuts, and maybe almonds again, and something else. And this is the second option. And the third option is to get basically every single nut out there. So you can get also at the bakery section again, almonds that are not smashed already. And this means you just have a lot of different options if you want to get the taste. And now also, because of my previous distinctions of categorizing food into different categories, so what I think of in terms of food calories and also in terms of getting the different parts of my nutrition together is previously I had the system of quantity and quality. So quantity was just volume, and that's usually vegetables, and quality was eggs and also nuts, and obviously also oil. So therefore I had these 2 different, so I had a distinction which I could categorize these 2 foods very easily into. And so now when it comes to maybe adding something like quantity, so just filling up your stomach more and also getting different fresh micronutrients, then you would just get vegetables again. And if you want to switch it out for something like nuts, which you already are then still consuming because of the 1-to-1 portion, and by the way, nuts also have